The Belgian Malinois hit the end of his lead so hard the reinforced nylon sang like a bowstring. He was 72 pounds of barely contained violence wrapped in a tactical vest that bore the worn, faded insignia of Naval Special Warfare Command. His name was Wraith, and the name had been earned across 4 deployments and 3 combat theaters without a single failed mission. Until 6 weeks ago, until the night a pressure plate IED detonated 40 feet from the assault team outside Kunduz, and Wraith threw his body in front of his handler to absorb the blast wave. Chief Petty Officer Logan Fenn stood just inside the automatic doors of the Pendleton Advanced Veterinary Center, with both hands wrapped around a lead that was already cutting into his palms. His jaw was set like concrete. His eyes were the hollow, red-rimmed eyes of a man who had not slept more than 2 hours in a row since the night of the detonation. "Back up," he said to the front desk receptionist, who had already backed up. "Everyone back up." Wraith was not growling. That was the part that made it worse. He had moved past growling. He was producing a low, continuous sound from somewhere deep in his chest, a frequency that vibrated against the stainless steel examination tables and made the fillings in your back teeth ache. His amber eyes swept the lobby in rapid, panicked arcs, and every time they landed on a new target, his haunches dropped half an inch, loading the spring. Piper Wynn was standing at the supply cabinet in the far corner of the lobby, a clipboard in one hand and an inventory count sheet in the other. She had been mid-sentence, filling in the number of 3cc syringes, when the doors slid open and she stopped, not because of the sound Wraith was making, not because of the sight of him straining against the lead. She stopped because of the way he was holding his left side. Dr. Sandra Mott emerged from exam room 2, already pulling on a pair of nitrile gloves. Mott had 18 years behind her, 7 of them at this facility, and she had treated military working dogs through blown knees and gunshot wounds and severe heat exhaustion. She took one long look at the Malinois in her lobby and reached for the radio on her belt. "Close the back corridor," she said quietly. "Nobody in or out." Logan looked at her. Something complicated moved across his face. "He's not going to calm down," he said. "I need you to know that before we start." The base vet tried 3 different sedation approaches, and he nearly took off 2 fingers. "I'm telling you right now, he will not." "I hear you, Chief." Mott kept her hands visible, her movements deliberate and unhurried. "Can you tell me what restraint system you've been using?" Logan gestured to the heavy tactical vest buckled tightly around Wraith's torso. "Same gear he's always worn in the field," Command said. "Keep everything familiar, less unfamiliar stimuli." "How long has he had the vest on today?" "Since 0400, standard protocol." Piper had not moved from the supply cabinet. She had set down the clipboard without looking at it. She was watching the way Wraith moved, or more precisely, the way he didn't. Every time he lunged left, he cut the movement short, pulling up on that side like something was interrupting the signal halfway through. Every time he spun, he abbreviated the turn, protecting something. His body kept trying to go somewhere, and something inside him kept stopping it. She knew what that looked like. She had seen it once before, in a different animal, in a different facility, and she had been 17 years old, and she hadn't understood it until 2 years after that, when she found her mother's field notebooks in a cardboard box in the garage and read them cover to cover in a single night. Mott had reached a decision. She turned toward the pharmaceutical cabinet. "Chief Fenn, I'm going to have to administer a sedative before we can safely run any imaging. There's no other way to get him on the table." Logan exhaled through his nose, the sound of a valve releasing pressure that had built up over 6 weeks. "He's scheduled for euthanasia at 1600, he said, and the flatness of his voice was worse than if he had shouted it. "I'm aware of what that means. I know what this appointment is. I'm asking you to look at him first. That's all I'm asking." "That's what we're trying to do," Mott said carefully. "Then look at him without sedating him first. because the last time someone brought a needle into his space, he destroyed half of Kennel Block C. Logan's eyes dropped to the dog, then came back up. There was no arrogance in his face. There was just a man who had run out of options and was watching the clock. He's not crazy, Doc. I know that's what the file says. I know that's what command says. But I've worked with this dog for 4 years. I've slept next to him in drainage ditches in Helmand Province. I know the difference between a broken dog and a dog that is trying to tell you something, and nobody is listening to him. The lobby was quiet after that, except for the low continuous sound from Wraith and the hum of the overhead lights. Dr. Mott. Piper's voice came out steadier than she expected. She cleared her throat once and tried again. Dr. Mott, I think I need to say something. Mott turned to look at her. So did Logan. So did the 2 other technicians who had pressed themselves flat against the far wall. Piper set down the count sheet. She walked across the lobby at the pace of someone who has made a decision and is carrying it out before she can think her way out of it. Stay behind the counter, Mott said. I see something. Piper stopped 8 feet from the dog, close enough to observe carefully, far enough to give him room, his left lateral. Every time he lunges or turns, he cuts the movement short on the left side. He's not completing the rotation, he's protecting something. Logan stared at her. He had a physical at the base. He was cleared for soft tissue. Soft tissue, yes, Piper said, but blast waves don't behave like impact trauma. A close proximity IED sends a concussive pressure wave through the body that travels along different pathways than blunt force. It finds seams. It finds spaces the X-ray didn't look at. She kept her eyes on the dog as she spoke. Not a challenge, just watching. The way you watch something that matters to you. That tactical vest, the chest strap. How tight is the fit? Logan's brow furrowed. Protocol fit, same calibration as always. Has he lost weight in the past 6 weeks? A pause. He's down about 7-8 pounds. He stopped eating well after the blast. Piper nodded slowly. So the chest strap that was calibrated for a 79-pound dog is now sitting tighter proportionally against a 72-pound dog. And if he sustained even a hairline fracture in the left rib cage from the blast concussion, she let the sentence finish itself. Every breath would be pressing a tightened strap against broken bone. Every restraint, every grab, every attempt to control him would compress the fracture and send a white-hot spike of pain through his nervous system. He wasn't attacking people out of psychological collapse. He was attacking people because every time someone tried to hold him, they were crushing a broken rib. Mott had gone very still. She was listening in a different way now. Logan had not moved. He was looking at Piper with an expression that was difficult to read clearly, somewhere between dismissal and the first, faint edge of something that did not have a name yet. She's a junior tech, he said finally. She's been here, what, 6 months? 8 months, Piper said. 8 months. He looked back at Wraith, who was still cycling, still guarding, still running that low frequency through the floor. Look, I appreciate it. I do, but I've had command veterinarians, 2 behavioral specialists, base medical staff look at this dog. None of them said anything about a fractured rib. Did any of them watch him move for more than 30 seconds before reaching for a sedative? The question landed in the room and stayed there. Logan's jaw tightened. Mott looked at Piper. Then she looked at the dog, at the way his left hind leg was fractionally unweighting every time he bore down on a lunge. She set the sedative kit on the counter and left her hand resting beside it. What are you proposing, Wynn? Let me approach him, Piper said, and let me take off the vest. Logan took half a step forward. Absolutely not. You get within arm's reach of that dog and he will put you on the ground. I've watched him do it to people twice your size. I know, Piper said. I'm going to approach him anyway. She didn't say it with defiance or bravado. She said it the way someone states a fact about weather. Logan opened his mouth and closed it. Chief Fenn, Piper said, and she looked at him directly for the first time. "Drop the tension on the lead. Give him 2 feet of slack. Don't pull against him." "If I give him slack, he'll lunge." "He's already lunging. The lead tension is telling him he's trapped. A trapped animal fights. Please." Something shifted in Logan Fenn's face. He was a man trained to read threat assessments in a fraction of a second, and he was reading this woman now. This junior technician, with her scrubs slightly wrinkled, and her hair coming out of a practical bun, and a count sheet she'd apparently forgotten on top of the supply cabinet. She was not performing confidence. She was not performing anything. She had the look of someone who had already done the math and come out the other side of it, quiet and certain. Slowly, Logan let the lead out 2 feet. Wraith felt the change instantly. The frantic cycling slowed a fraction. His ears, which had been pinned flat to his skull, rotated a few degrees. Piper lowered herself into a crouch, not to her knees, not yet, just low enough to bring her head below the dog's eye line. She turned her body 45 degrees away from him, presenting her shoulder rather than her chest. Then she made a sound. It was not a word. It was not a melody. It was 2 tones, a low note, then a high note, then the low note again, pulsed in a particular rhythm that would have sounded arbitrary to anyone in that lobby who had not seen page 47 of Sergeant First Class Karen Wynn's field notebook. A rhythm that, to a dual-purpose SEAL K-9 trained to Naval Special Warfare Command standards, meant one specific and absolute thing. Mission complete. Stand down. We're going home. Karen Wynn had documented the signal in her own handwriting, in her tight, economical script, after a cross-training exercise with an NSW unit in Coronado in 2009. She had written a note in the margin that said, "Acoustic cues with no linguistic content bypass the arousal filter better than verbal commands in high-stress environments." She had drawn a small diagram of the 2-tone cadence and the pause interval between pulses. Piper had read that notebook so many times she could recite every page from memory. She hadn't known when she memorized it that she would ever use it. Wraith's head swung toward her. The continuous sound in his chest changed pitch. "Don't move," Logan whispered. His voice had gone very quiet, the quiet of someone trying not to disturb something fragile. "Don't move. Don't breathe." Piper was still making the 2-tone sound. Low, high, low, low, high, low. Her shoulder turned to the dog, her eyes fixed on the floor just past his front paws, her hands open and flat at her sides. Wraith took 1 step toward her. The step was tentative. The gait of an animal reconsidering a conclusion it had already locked in. His nose dropped. His breathing, which had been ragged and erratic, began to develop something like a rhythm. He took another step. He was 18 inches away when he stopped and stood still, his muzzle inches from the side of Piper's face sniffing. She did not turn toward him. She did not flinch. She held the 2-tone signal, quiet and steady, the way you hold a flame cupped in both hands against wind. The sound in his chest fell away. Not all at once, not dramatically. It simply stopped being necessary. Piper raised her right hand slowly, not toward his head, not toward his face, toward the side panel of the tactical vest. Her fingers found the chest strap buckle on his left flank. She felt Wraith's entire body contract in a full bracing flinch, and that flinch told her everything she needed to know. "Easy," she said, barely above a breath. "Easy, I've got it." She pressed the release prong and pulled the strap free. The buckle came open with a sound like a quiet exhale. For 1 second, nothing happened. Then Wraith's left shoulder dropped. His hind end swayed. He made a sound that was not a growl and not a bark, and not anything with a clean category, something raw and old and beyond language. He turned toward Piper and leaned his full weight against her side with the complete unguarded trust of an animal that has finally decided to stop holding itself together. And then his legs went out from under him. He went down slowly, like a structure settling, folding to the floor on his left side. He pressed his muzzle into the space between Piper's knee and the linoleum, and lay there. And then the 72-pound combat dog, who had bitten 3 handlers and destroyed half of Kennel Block C, made a sound that would stay with everyone in that room for the rest of their lives, a long, stuttered exhale. The sound of a body releasing a pain it had been carrying for 6 weeks because it had no other choice. Someone behind Piper let out a shaking breath. It was not the receptionist. It was Logan Fenn. He was standing with the slack lead hanging from one hand, staring at his dog on the floor, and his face had come completely apart, not gradually, all at once. The controlled, squared-off mask of a man who had absorbed years of grief without revealing it had simply failed, the way load-bearing structures fail when the load finally exceeds what they were built to hold. He dropped to one knee beside Wraith. He put his hand on the dog's right flank, the right side, carefully, by instinct, and Wraith turned his head and pressed his nose against Logan's wrist. "Why didn't you tell me?" Logan said. His voice was barely audible. He was not talking to anyone in the room. 6 weeks, and I didn't." "You couldn't have known," Piper said. She kept her hand on Wraith's shoulder, light and even. "A blast fracture at that site doesn't show on standard radiographs. You would have needed a targeted CT with contrast imaging. That's not part of the standard post-deployment screening protocol." Logan looked up at her. His eyes were red at the rims. "How do you know that signal? That's an NSW field signal. That's operational conditioning protocol." Piper looked at him for a moment. "My mother was a K9 handler," she said. "Army, Sergeant First Class Karen Wynn. She cross-trained with an NSW unit out of Coronado in 2009, and she documented everything she learned." She paused. "She deployed to Kunar Province in 2011. She didn't come back." Logan did not speak. "Her dog's name was Smoke," Piper said. "A Malinois, same as Wraith. They'd been together 6 years. She kept her voice steady. The effort it cost was visible very faintly around her eyes. "When Smoke came back to the States after my mother was killed, he was exactly like this. Violent, unpredictable. He attacked every handler who tried to work with him. The base vet labeled it irreversible psychological trauma and recommended euthanasia." Her hand rested still on Wraith's flank. "They put him down 11 days after he arrived." The clinic was quiet enough to hear the refrigeration unit running in the back hallway. And, Logan said, because he could hear it coming. 3 years later, I enrolled in a vet tech program, and I started reading everything I could find on blast trauma in working dogs. I found a Walter Reed study that documented a pattern of post-blast rib fractures in military canines presenting with hyperaggression. The fractures occurred almost entirely on the left lateral. She looked down at Wraith. "Because most handlers are right-handed, the dog works on the left side. The dog takes the blast from the outside. It's always the left." She was quiet for a moment. "I think Smoke was in pain for every one of those 11 days, she said. "I think every time someone tried to restrain him, they were pressing against broken bone. I think he wasn't broken at all. I think he was just hurting, and nobody looked in the right place." Dr. Mott had not moved in 2 full minutes. She stood beside the pharmaceutical cabinet with the sedative kit still resting under her hand, and she slowly took her hand away from it. "We need to get him into imaging, right now." The automatic doors slid open. The man who came through them was not in scrubs. He wore a Navy service uniform, the silver oak leaf of a commander on his collar, and he carried a flat document case tucked under his right arm. He stopped when he saw Wraith on the floor and Piper beside him, and something moved across his face that was not easily classified. Commander Spencer Hollis looked at Logan Fenn. "Stand down, Chief. I got here as fast as I could." Logan stiffened. "Sir, I know about the euthanasia order. I'm the one who requested the delay." Hollis moved further into the lobby, and his gaze shifted from the dog to the young woman kneeling beside him. He stopped. "You're Karen Wynn's daughter." Piper looked up sharply. "The two-tone signal," Hollis said. "Your mother developed that cadence during the Coronado cross-training." She said the dogs filtered human voices during high arousal states, but a non-linguistic acoustic cue went straight through. She tested it on 6 different dogs. He paused. "She was the best handler I ever worked alongside." Piper did not speak for a moment. "What's in the file, Commander?" she said. Hollis set the document case on the waiting room bench. He opened it and removed a manila folder. Inside were photocopies of a post-action veterinary report dated October 2011, stamped with a classification banner that had been declassified 8 months prior as part of a Department of Defense records review. He held the folder out to Piper. Her hands were steadier than she expected them to be. "That's Smoke's post-mortem examination," Hollis said, "conducted at a facility in Bethesda as part of a retrospective study on blast injuries in military working dogs. The pathologist found 2 healed microfractures in the left rib cage and evidence of a stress reaction at the costochondral junction consistent with chronic compression injury." He let that settle before continuing. The notation in the margin reads, "Presentation consistent with pain-elicited aggression, not primary behavioral pathology. Euthanasia decision may have been premature." The room held that sentence. "They knew," Piper said. "Not in time," Hollis said. "The retrospective study was designed to improve future outcomes. They were trying to prevent it from happening again." He looked at Wraith lying on the floor, calm now, his breathing slow, and even for the first time in 6 weeks. "I've been trying to get that file declassified for 2 years. When Wraith's behavioral report crossed my desk yesterday morning, I pulled every clearance I had left. I drove up from Coronado at 0300. He paused. "I thought I was coming here to stop an order. I didn't expect someone to have already solved it." Logan Fenn reached out and covered Piper's hand with his where it rested on Wraith's side. He didn't say anything. His throat moved once, and then he looked away. "My mother thought Smoke was broken," Piper said quietly. "After she died, we all thought that he fell apart without her. That grief did something irreversible to him." She looked at the report in her hand. "I've been living with that for 14 years. "He wasn't broken," Hollis said. "He was hurt." There was nothing to add to that. Not right then. Dr. Mott was already moving toward the back hallway. "Let's get him into the imaging suite." Full chest CT and a targeted bone scan, left lateral rib cage. She paused at the hallway door and looked back. "Wynn, I want you in with me. He'll stay calmer with you close." What the CT showed 90 minutes later was precise and exact. 2 hairline fractures, one in the 5th rib, one in the 7th, originating from the point where the chest strap of Wraith's tactical vest had made its closest contact with his body. The bone scan showed active inflammation at both sites, consistent with a 6-week-old blast injury that had been under continuous mechanical stress every single day since the detonation, every time the vest tightened under exertion, every time a handler gripped his torso, every time someone tried to forcibly hold him still. Those fractures flexed, and what resulted was the kind of pain that makes rational behavior impossible. He was not dangerous. He was not psychologically destroyed. He was a 4-year combat veteran with 2 broken ribs who had been trying, in the only language available to him, to make someone stop pressing on them. Dr. Mott explained the treatment plan to Logan in the hallway, while Piper stayed with Wraith in the recovery bay. The plan was straightforward: 8 weeks of supervised rest, a properly fitted lightweight recovery vest that stabilized the chest without compressing the fracture sites, anti-inflammatory medication to resolve the bone inflammation, and a gradual reintroduction to handler contact, beginning with right-side approaches only. Operational duty was not on the table. The rib fractures, once healed, would be stable, but the risk of re-injury in a high-impact combat environment made continued service a medical impossibility. What lay ahead of Wraith was retirement, and a life without the tactical vest and the deployment cycles and the weight of missions that never really ended. When Mott told Logan this, he stood against the wall for a long time without responding. Then he said, "Where will he go?" Mott said carefully, "That's partly up to you." The answer in the end was not a complicated one. 8 weeks later, the Pendleton Advanced Veterinary Center looked entirely like itself. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and the faint sweetness of the treat jar that someone kept leaving open on the front desk. Morning light came through the east-facing windows at a low angle and laid long rectangles across the clean floor. The automatic doors slid open. Logan Fenn came through them in civilian clothes, a grey Henley, worn jeans, the kind of boots worn for comfort rather than field work. Beside him on a light nylon leash walked Wraith, 74 pounds now and still gaining, fitted with a soft padded recovery vest in a plain warm tan that bore no insignia of any kind. The dog's tail was moving. Not a cautious wag, not a tentative one, the full, uninhibited, whole-body movement of an animal who has remembered what it feels like not to hurt and has decided on good evidence that the world is worth engaging with. Piper looked up from the front counter and said, "Look at you." Wraith crossed the lobby in 4 strides and pressed his head against her stomach and left it there. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere unexpected and can't be manufactured, and put both hands on his ears. Logan stood back and watched. The hollowness that had lived behind his eyes 8 weeks ago in this same lobby was gone. He looked like a man who had set something very heavy down and was still getting used to the absence of the weight. His last follow-up, he said. "I know," Piper said. "I scheduled it." She crouched to Wraith's level and ran her hands carefully along his left side, palpating with practiced attention. The dog held still for it, not the rigid, pain-braced stillness of an animal enduring something it cannot escape, but the relaxed, cooperative stillness of one who trusts the hands on him. Both fracture sites were cool to the touch, no flinch response. The inflammation had resolved completely. She looked up at Logan. "He's clear," she said, "medically discharged." Logan nodded. He pressed his lips together once. Commander Hollis submitted the retrospective report to the DoD K9 Medical Review Board 3 weeks ago. Targeted bone scans are going to be added to the standard post-blast screening protocol for all military working dogs. Piper stood up. She kept one hand resting on Wraith's head. "They're also pulling 11 prior cases," Logan said. "Dogs euthanized in the past decade with similar presentations, behavioral flags, left side guarding, blast history." He met her eyes steadily. "Smoker's case is included in the review." Piper's hand went still on Wraith's ear for a moment. She looked at the far wall at nothing in particular. Then she nodded, short and quiet and settled. There was nothing sentimental in it, just acknowledgement. The kind that comes from a long time of carrying something alone and finally knowing, beyond doubt, what it actually was. Wraith pressed his head up into her palm. She scratched behind his ear, and his tail moved again, wide and easy, and without reservation, and the morning light stretched itself across the clean floor of the lobby, and outside the windows the day was already opening up.